Welcome to this TARANIS Quick Tip. In this quick tip we're going to be setting up a relatively complicated mix to do something that's pretty cool. We're going to do something around differential thrust. Now differential thrust is useful for those planes that have more than one engine. So here's a little model on the screen where we have an engine on both the left and the right side of the fuselage. And what can be very useful is as you steer the plane, the thrust that each of the engines produce changes to help you with that maneuver. So the classic example is when you're taxiing on the floor and you're moving out, and as well as moving the rudder, what you'd like to be able to do is move the rudder from one side to the other, and every time you move the rudder, what you're actually also doing is you're also affecting the amount of thrust that's been generated by the aeroplane. So it's been pulled and pushed in each direction. Now being able to have differential thrust is great, being able to set it up is fantastic, and the TARANIS radio, because of its advanced programming features, can absolutely do this. Not only do this on the ground, but also do some other cool stuff too. So in this video we're going to go through and actually do quite a few things. But let me explain what we're going to do before we try it so that it doesn't appear too complicated. The first thing we're going to do is go into the OpenTX companion and we're going to set up a mix so that some of the rudder value is overlaid onto the throttle. So as I move the rudder about, the throttle values change. So again, we get that difference in thrust and power on each side of the model that will help with the turn. We'll do that first. Then what we'll do is we'll actually make it so that by the flick of a switch, you can turn that on and off. So you don't have to always have, every time you use the rudder, having that differential thrust happen, and that will be useful for when you're flying normally. However, if we've set this up, then actually we've almost got the perfect combination. With the addition of one more set of mixes, which is almost identical to the rudder throttle one that we did initially, we can also set up a mix so as we use the ailerons in the air, we can actually also have differential thrust too. So as an example, we're going to set up these three modes on the radio, selectable by a switch. We'll have a normal flight mode where both of the throttles just respond linearly to the throttle value. We'll have a flight mode for taxiing, where as you move the rudder about, you're actually going to change the power in the engines. And to complete the trio, we'll also do an acro flight mode, where in this case, we're going to mix the ailerons into the throttles, so that as I move the ailerons from side to side, I'm also going to affect the thrust of these two engines. And the very last thing we'll do is we'll actually put a throttle cut around the whole thing, so that even if we nudge the ailerons or the rudder when the throttle's supposed to be dead, we won't get any activity from either of the engines. Now we've explained what we're going to do, we're going to start in the very middle. We'll do the rudder throttle mix first, then we'll sort that out so that we have a switch so we can turn that mix on and off, so when we're taxiing. Then we'll put the throttle cut in place, and the last thing, we'll just ram home the point with an aileron to throttle mix so that you have that 3-position switch on the radio that will enable us to decide how we want the differential thrust to work. So now we've explained what we're going to do, let's go to OpenTX and actually start setting up a model and building it from scratch. So here we are in OpenTX Companion 2.0, and we've actually got a model set up already. Just to very quickly demo how this works. So if I go into the simulator, you can see that if I turn throttle hold off, we have a standard linear throttle for both channels 1 and 2, which will be connected to the two engines on the craft. And then if I pop it into taxi mode, then as I move the rudder, I also get that differential thrust. If I turn it onto acro mode, as I use the aileron, I also get that differential thrust. And if we take a very quick look at the mixes, that's what they look like. Might look a little bit complicated, but as we go through them step by step, hopefully it'll make a lot more sense. So we're going to create a brand new model. We'll call it test. Click on next. We'll say throttle on channel 1. We'll say it's a standard wing. We're going to leave channel 2 free, so we'll say yes, it's got ailerons, pop them on channel 3 for me. It hasn't got flaps, not bothered about air brakes. It has got a tail, so we're going to ask it to put on channel 4 and 5. Now the reason I've done it that way is because I want channel 2 empty, because I want to copy channel 1 onto channel 2, so we have two outputs for the two different motors. So if we jump into mixes, I can just copy the first throttle and just paste it into channel 2. So now I have two throttles, an aileron, elevator and rudder. So if I jump into the simulator, what we'll see now as I move the throttle up and down, we actually have the two outputs for channels 1 and 2 working great. So as I increase the throttle, I'm increasing the power from both the engines in the model. Great stuff. Now the next thing we need to do is then to mix some of the rudder channel into the throttle. So that way, as I move the rudder about, it's actually changing the throttle values. So we can add a mix onto channel 1, which is our left-hand motor. We're going to add a little bit of our friend rudder. And we'll mix about 30%. Now we can assign it to a switch so we can turn the taxi mode on and off. I think that's a really good idea. So let's do it here while we're playing with it. So we're going to put it in the middle position of switch E like we just had. There we go. And we can now simply copy and paste that mix onto channel 2. However, we don't want the same polarities plus 30% because actually we want one of them to go the other way. So I'll just change one of them to be minus 30. There we go. Okay, jump back into simulator to see if we've broken everything or if that's working. So there's our standard throttle. Let me pop switch E into the middle position, and now as I move the rudder we have differential thrust. Now if we were looking at a craft where channel 1 was on the left wing, channel 2 was on the right wing, then the way it should work is that as I push the rudder to the left, the right hand channel, which is channel 2, should increase thrust, and it does. If we had that the wrong way round, then all we'd do is in our mixes, it would just change which one had the plus 30% and which one had the minus 30%. Okay, all makes sense. Let's then use the same way to actually create a mix that uses the output for the aileron. So we're going to copy and paste that mix again, but this time we'll edit it and we'll say no, I don't want it from the rudder, let's have it from the aileron. And this time we'll have it in the switch position where its SE is down. Okay, and again we'll copy that and we'll paste it onto channel 2. We'll change the polarity so that one engine is getting more thrust, the other is getting less. Jump into simulator, see how that works. So put it into acro mode, and now we have the differential thrust again on the aileron. Fantastic. Okay, and put it into the middle position, we have the differential thrust on the rudder. Put it into the top position, we have no differential thrust at all. There is a danger with this, however. If we were in one of the modes where some of the values has been mixed in, you can actually see that even though the throttle's at 0 position, if we accidentally bumped the aileron when it was in acro mode, or the rudder if it was in taxi mode, we'd actually start to get a little bit of engine rotation. So we need to fix that. What we're going to do is go into special functions, and we need to add in a switch. So I'm going to add a switch that's going to completely turn off all throttle activity. I'm going to use SF up here on the left hand side. So we're going to pick SF in here. When it's in the up position, we're going to say override channel 1, make it minus 100. That's our throttle channel for one of the engines. We're also going to have to do the same thing, of course, because we have two of those. So for safety, let's add the same thing to channel 2. enable that too. Go back and check it. So here we have our throttle is enabled, that's working great. If we turn the throttle off, then even if we move the rudder, we're getting nothing. Even if we go into aileron, acro mode, even though the aileron's moving, we're getting nothing. So now we've managed to secure and make that safe as well. So that's how we do it. We can have a standard mode, we can have a taxiing mode, and we can have an acro mode. So if you want more differential thrust, you increase these numbers, make it 40, plus 40 and minus 40, and you could potentially even set up a switch that changed the weight as well. Thank you for taking the time to watch that video. There are lots of other videos on the channel and they're carefully ordered into playlists, so you may find that there are other videos on this same subject that you can go and watch. So I would recommend going into the playlist area of Painless 360 YouTube channel and looking around and seeing what there is. You never know what you might find. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and happy flying.